So I think it was really interesting that Lisa starts out her conversation with how she's here, because I'm very much the same way, not necessarily because I had a perception of inventors, but had you asked me, it would have been very similar to kind of the mad scientist picture. And indeed, my co-founder bears some truth to that analogy. But I didn't come into the Internet of Things to participate in the Internet of Things. I actually started my technology career trying to break away from the legal profession for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was in 2008, the real estate market that I had founded 12 companies in had absolutely collapsed, leaving me with the same 80-hour work week for only 4% of the income that I had been making previously. Now that's a good time to shift careers. In that moment, I found that it is very challenging to get hired as an attorney and not do legal work. So nobody wants a lawyer around, that's just the truth. Sorry if there are any other lawyers in here, I feel your pain. So I went to the GE licensee for emerging technologies in consumer and home electronics. And I was actually hired to do analyses around Energy Star and Sarbanes-Oxley. So some really exciting work. And the truth is that the infrastructure didn't exist within the company to support the endeavors that they were considering in that space. So I gave them a business analysis after 4 weeks that said, if you want to do this work, it will cost you this much money, and promptly got shut down, which was fine. I didn't really want to do that work anyway. So I looked around and realized I had 17 months left on my contract, and there were some lingering projects in the space, one of which was a business analysis around protocols for the Internet of Things, not yet called that in our company, that would address their 3,000 SKUs. So GE has 3,000 consumer and home electronic SKUs. The things you see in the aisle on your way out of the store, basically everything but light bulbs belonged to this company as a licensee. And they were trying to determine which of those wireless protocols would affect and impact their bottom line if included in those devices. So think Z-Wave, Zigbee, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, your basics, right? And so, I fell in love immediately upon literally cracking the book with the idea of the Internet of Things. Again, we didn't call it that yet. This was 2010. And so, not that it wasn't called that, we were in Oklahoma. And so things go a little more slowly there. I did this analysis. Only 2 weeks into this project, I found myself here in Philadelphia, knocking on the door of the CTO of Comcast's office. I'm not kidding. I don't even know how I got there. I do know, but it was fortuitous, asking, why is Xfinity going to be Zigbee when all of these other automation platforms are going with Z-Wave? And I maybe a little bit of hubris in my naivete, and began some really important and meaningful conversations. In the next 18 months, the remainder of my contract, I participated in 8 national rollouts. Comcast, Xfinity, ADT, AT&T, Vivint, which wasn't even called Vivint yet, and 4 others, Best Buy, etc. And I found my calling, creating strategic partnerships within the Internet of Things space. And I've nearly recovered from being a lawyer, so I am Felicite Moorman. Please don't hesitate to connect on Twitter, etc. with me. I am, as Tracy said, the CEO of 2 Internet of Things companies, which is an interesting story that we'll skip so that we can get to the meaty stuff today. BlueLogix is a hardware-focused IoT company. So think electrical engineering. Now, we don't design most of our devices. Most of our devices come to us from Fortune 500 companies who don't want to ramp up an embedded team. So somebody brings us a smoke detector. And they say something exciting like, we want this on the shelf in March. And I say to them, have you met your merchandising company? And so this will happen the day after Thanksgiving, usually, and they want it to launch at CES. This is my real life. So we have 80% of our products complete using code libraries from Z-Wave, Zigbee, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi. So we can do that time-to-market play. We are the global certification house for Z-Wave. So if you've ever created a Z-Wave device, probably it's been in my hands. We do, again, the advanced engineering for embedded design. And I'm excited, and I would say bullish is an understatement, on LoRa and where LoRa is going. We work specifically with MachineQ. It's fortunate to be in Philadelphia at this time. Now, the second company, and also related to LoRa, is Stratus. Now, Stratus provides a software platform to connect those disparate devices that Bulogix is making. Convenient, but we hadn't done software. I'm a hardware junkie. My co-founder is also a hardware junkie, but we started getting phone calls. My favorite one was a gentleman who took a thermostat off the wall of his apartment buildings. He'd installed 300 smart thermostats in his apartments. And he took one off the wall and dissected it and found our name, Bulogix, on the board. We'd branded it. We were being a little cheeky with our partner in the Fortune 500 place. They let us get away with it, and we got this phone call. And he said to me, "Your thermostats don't work." And I said back, "Could you please look at the brand on that? It's not my thermostat." And he said, "I can't control it." And I'm like, "Okay, sir, who are you?" "Well, I'm like one of New Jersey's richest billionaires." I'm like, "Okay, now you have my attention." And so he said, "I have 10,000 apartments, and I don't have a solution. I can't control these thermostats." And I said, "Well, can your renters control their thermostats?" I didn't really understand the full problem, but he had an all-inclusive model. So his rents included all of the utilities, all of which hit his bottom line, reducing his net operating income and reducing the valuation of his portfolio of 10,000 units. So this guy, this is what billionaires do with their time, if you didn't know, sat on the weekend and went through his energy bills, looking for challenging places he could fix, and was really good at it. So he said, I said, "The problem is software. That's not something I can control easily with hardware. That's really something that needs to be developed for your space." And I went to talk to Johnson and Siemens and Schneider, and I said, "Do you have anything for this space?" "Well, not anything cost effective." So we developed the software to control those thermostats. And it did snowball a little bit from there. Since we launched in 2015, mid-year, we've installed in 225,000 apartments in 46 states. So there is a demand when you meet the cost requirements in the IoT. So today we're talking industrial. I think we have some good idea of what the Internet of Things is, but what is the industrial Internet of Things? And I think it's worthwhile to just take a moment to juxtapose it against consumer. Consumer electronics, home electronics, as I just relayed, can be industrial. So if there's a real estate mogul controlling your thermostat in any way whatsoever, that's probably industrial. Obviously, a lot of us think industrial, we think agriculture, warehouses, Boeing, airports. But industrial is really spreading out to nearly every business now, which to me is very exciting because that's just opportunity for those of us who have a passion for the Internet of Things to really engage a broader spectrum of people. So for our purposes, any connected devices, whether they're consumer or home, that are also included in a business purpose. Just some of the places where IoT is today. So probably you've seen these. Certainly every device, and by device I mean something that is powered in some way, it can be battery, is capable of being made a connected device. We see this every day. The things we are asked to connect, you would maybe not believe. Dog feeders, just that's my favorite today. A safe. So imagine the rebar and concrete that it takes to create a safe. Now, figure out how to connect that to the internet, because your goods are inside of it. It's hard, but it's exciting. And the technology is decreasing in price, and the software is increasing in sophistication. So there's tons of opportunity there. The industrial Internet of Things is becoming, for all intents and purposes, ubiquitous. So here's something that surprised me, and I'm not often surprised in this space, but last year I was looking at some facts and discovered that in 2008, there were as many connected devices as people. I didn't expect that. That was a little bit of shock and awe for me. So when you think about that, the Internet of Things was a thing before any of us knew it was a thing. And that's exciting to me. But by show of hands, so moving a little bit, how many devices, not even 2 years from now, but 2020, how many devices do you anticipate there will be connected in that year? So we're going to go 10, 25, and 50 or more billion. So 10 billion. 18 months from now, about 25 billion? 50 billion or more? All right, you guys have done this before. Great information. Cisco predicted that by 2020, there will be 50 billion connected devices. Now, Intel calls their shot way over that fence at 200 billion connected devices. Now, that's a lot of room. And I'm not going to get in between Intel and Cisco, that's for sure. But that number, while global, is 150 devices for every person in this room and every person in the United States, for perspective. Now, I got kids, so I'm about that right now. But that is a tremendous number of devices for our persons. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to need more chargers. That was funny. So let's jump into blockchain a little bit. Somebody asked me the other day, can you explain blockchain to me like a child? And I have a 10-year-old, so I do this with some frequency. She's not that excited about it yet. And she's very excited about the IoT, so just give her a minute. And she asked me, can you do this as if I was a child? And I thought I had a pretty good explanation. I'm not going to share it with you now because I found a better one. But I was impressed with myself, so I went to look to see if I had reinvented the wheel at all. And indeed, I found Bettina. So this is one of my sheroes, and she explains it to a 5-year-old. And I'm going to share it with you because I think this back and forth is both precious and adorable, but also a real great start.
What we're going to talk about today? It's
called blockchain.
What's blockchain?
That's a really good question. It's actually a way that we can trade. Do you know what trade is?
It's when you take turns doing something. It's when you give up most of what you want, right?
When you give
she
up
has
most
a big
of what you
brother.
want? Well, sometimes that definitely happens for sure. What if I told you that there's a kind of technology that I work on that means you could trade with any kid all over the world?
Really?
Yeah.
If I could trade with any kid, I would trade something I don't like so much.
That's probably a good idea. Maybe somebody else likes it more than you do. So normally, when people trade, they have to go to the store or they have to know the person so that they can get what they asked for. With blockchain, you can make that exact same trade, but you don't need the store and you don't even necessarily need to know the other person.
I know, are you all in love? I showed that to my daughter. She was a little more impressed, despite the fact that that's not me. If you haven't, if you are interested in blockchain and you haven't discovered Bettina, by all means, she founded Animal Ventures, and she's an exceptional explainer of this tech on not just the 5-year-old level. At the end, she gets to an expert. And the conversation they have is really profound and will influence how you think about blockchain far, far more than I will. So while that's adorable, probably we should take a little bit deeper dive unless you guys are hungry now, and then we'll just go. Okay, we'll keep going. So as we work through this, I think of blockchain when I'm learning new concepts around it, much like Wikipedia to Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, there are a lot of young people in this room, so I'm going to tell you, there's this thing that's about this big, and it's a book, and it's full of information. It's a joke, guys. I know you know what an encyclopedia is. But imagine that all of our collected knowledge our history, used to be provided to us in a subscription model. So this was, pre-SaaS, in a prescription model by bookmakers, Encyclopedia Britannica. And think of the issues around that moment. Who could access these books? Like I said, they're a subscription, and they were very expensive. So if you had one growing up, you were very fortunate. And by one, I don't mean one book, I mean one set. And the set was constantly being iterated on paper. My kids can't fathom that today. They're like, wait, what? That's hilarious. Or like this little girl, Pepper, really? So you compare that now to Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is a peer-to-peer network of knowledge. And those knowledge keepers or iterators hold each other accountable for truth, or at least the best version of truth that can garner consensus. So in other words, what they believe is actual and gets perpetuated. Nobody needs to get permission, so nobody says, that's okay, not when it's published. Now, the truth is if you've ever written your own personal wiki page about how IoT awesome you are, you may have found out that there are indeed gatekeepers. Not that I did that. Don't go look. So that said, the first part of blockchain that I think is very important is its peer-to-peer capacity. So people work on this together. And by people, that could be machines. It doesn't mean some dude sitting there on a laptop. It could be simply a machine set up to run, and is very often the case. Full servers, even. So let's talk about a block in and of itself. What is a block? So a block has 3 parts. Has everybody heard of Bitcoin? I'm not asking if you understand it, but has everyone heard of it? Great, okay. So you've heard of Bitcoin. What is in a Bitcoin block? What information is there? An amount, so a currency, it's a cryptocurrency, so an amount is included in that block. There's also a sender and a receiver, so to whom it's going, from whom it came, and the amount. So that's your data that's included in the block. Now, also there is a hash. And people get hung up on this, and I haven't quite figured out why, but a hash is basically a fingerprint. It's a unique identifier on that block that says we've created this piece of data. But there's something important, and this is where the chain comes in, if you will. There's the past hash. So to whatever that hash, whatever that block is attaching to with the new hash, it is attaching to an old hash in a chain of blocks, right, that actually states additional transactions. Now here it gets more exciting. So now we have a peer-to-peer network, we have data, we have hashing that connects these things together in a chain. So far so good. And now we're actually going to take that one step further and require a proof of work. So you can't just put those unique fingerprint identifiers in there and expect that there are not computers fast enough to actually compute what they could be and tamper with a blockchain. So this proof of work, this algorithm, this problem, if you will, requires that computing system to work to create known identifiers, to know those hashes. They can't do it without the proof of work. And that takes, I haven't looked at Bitcoin in a few days, but between 10 and 20 minutes. Now, that's not an accident. It takes between 10 and 20 minutes because right now that's how fast computers could otherwise tamper with. So it's clever. They can't tamper with the blockchain because the computers aren't fast enough to do all the proof of works behind that block. Does that make sense? So it's not just, you can't just throw them on. There's an inefficiency in this super efficient place that's on purpose to keep it tamper-proof. That was really frustrating for me, by the way. I was like, wait, what? It takes you a little bit to get it done. And you can go to Bitcoin and you can see. It takes 10 to 20 minutes, but you can see new blocks coming on. And you can sit there and watch until they do. And that's kind of exciting to see visually how this is actually working. So when you combine this, you combine that distributed nature In other words, there's not one keeper of information. You get an immutable, so you can't change it, no tampering, transparent, intermediary-less, so there's no third party between blocks. This is block to block, person to person, peer to peer. Method of trade, which is what Pepper learned. That's all she learned, just the trading part. And that's fine. That's great for 5-year-olds. Now, if you don't believe in the ubiquity of blockchain, if you're a skeptic, go for it. But guess where this is? This is a Bitcoin ATM machine in my Dunkin' Donuts in East Falls. Not right here, East Falls. And when they put it in there, I was like, dorks, but in a good way. And then I'd go get a coffee with some frequency, and there's somebody there all the time. I don't know what that person's doing, that's not my business, but there's somebody there all the time. Different people, not just the same person, to be clear. Making exchanges, presumably, not just playing with the screen. I don't ask questions, but think about that for a second. If it's useful, if it was here, maybe I would question the ubiquity as well. But just as we compared Encyclopedia Britannica to Wikipedia, so is it worthwhile to compare our current banking system, a centralized system, or even PayPal, to Bitcoin. So think centralized, think intermediaries, think fees, think inefficiencies. Dude, have you tried to deposit a check lately? I mean, I know there's mobile and all that, but sometimes you have to go to a bank. That blows my mind today. I have to go to the bank in my car. I have to have a car still, but just a little bit because I'm in East Falls. So that said, this decentralized methodology is profound in comparison. Someday our kids will say to us the same, like they do about the Encyclopedia Britannica. So the truth is some people panic a little bit about cryptocurrency. Anybody a little nervous? No, we're good. Nope, all good. Okay, I gotta go. I'm just kidding, I'm not leaving you yet. Okay, so has anybody here read The Creature from Jekyll Island? Phenomenal book. And if you're nervous about cryptocurrencies, it's this big. It's literally this thick, by the way. It's huge, but don't be intimidated because it's a fast read, I promise. So this is a book about our fiat system of money today and how it was invented in 1910 on Jekyll Island in Georgia as the Federal Reserve System. So before that, our money was based on a gold standard. In other words, for every dollar printed, there was an equivalent dollar of gold sitting in a vault. Now, our system of money, our fiat system, is based on our government's promise. No, just me? So here's the question. Are cryptocurrencies really less viable than the promises of our governments? I don't know, I'm bullish. So that decentralized global economic capability is where the future is moving today. I can't tell you when it will get there, but that lack of inefficiency is going away. Now, if you were thinking about that dude at the ATM at my Dunkin' Donuts and you were a little nervous, and it's always a dude right now, because I'm not going to the Bitcoin. There are dark places that this can go. I don't know where that money's going or what it's for, but frankly, cryptocurrencies are an opportunity to democratize our economy and bring everybody into the same place. And to me, that is profound. It's going to take some work. So you saw this a minute ago, right? The industrial Internet of Things in every place that it is. The blockchain is the same. Any place where there's a device that has to provide data to some central repository, and then that data has to get crunched by someone or something, and then that data then gets passed on to somebody who has to create prescriptive actions based on that information. You're getting my point, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's really a very inefficient methodology of understanding what's coming from these devices. Now, I can't give each of you an example of how blockchain is going to impact your specific industry, whether you're touching the IoT or whether you're not yet, but you're interested. But what I'd like to do today is give you some very clear examples of how blockchain is impacting my industry, and hopefully get you to ask the same questions that I'm asking myself that are far more generic than, how will this device impact this transaction and therefore provide me with more income? But something along those lines. So, cryptocurrencies, that was Bitcoin. And they are all the rage. They certainly get the most media attention. They are creating a lot of wealth for certain individuals, but that's a very finite blockchain application. And to me, what's far more exciting really is the Internet of Things application for blockchain. Ethereum is an enterprise blockchain. So in other words, this is what businesses are using today. In part, there are several Ethereums, just like there are several Bitcoins, to create trust within the blockchains. So this is not, it has coins, which can be confusing, but this is not a currency in and of itself. This is a smart contract, or a mechanism for creating smart contracts within blockchain. So, as a lawyer, a contract is an agreement between two parties that, once fulfilled on one side, has an obligation on the other side. That's simple. They can get very complex, as I'm sure everybody in this room has experienced in one way or another. But basically, that is the explanation of a simple contract. That data in cryptocurrency was an amount, right? Like it was the sender, the receiver, and the amount on the block. On Ethereum, that data isn't an amount, but it's a small puzzle, if you will, an algorithm, that says, to Lisa's point, if you haven't played with IFFT, which stands for if this, then that, in the IoT, this is basically an IFFT. So this problem inside says, if this happens, then that happens. Very straightforward contract, but little inside of a block. Now, who in this room has used Kickstarter or Indiegogo to either fund your own project or to support somebody else's project? So this is a great example of the contract, if you will, a smart contract. In this case, your third-person intermediary, the person between you and your project, or you and your supporter, is Kickstarter, or is Indiegogo. So in this circumstance, you will give money, and frankly, it's not even money, it's the promise of money, because your card isn't charged immediately. Your card is charged when a goal is met. So that's your if this, then that. So for the privilege of holding your money, your project pays a fee. So that's your third-party intermediary. That doesn't have to exist with blockchain. So with blockchain, here's a thing. Say it's a musician who's finishing an album but can't quite get to the end, and you want to support that musician. And instead of going through Kickstarter, you and several of your friends put that into a smart contract, into a block. And it's an if this, then that block. So if indeed this person meets a goal that they've set, so $10,000, then all of these monies that are just being held, and not monies necessarily, but the promise of money, so your card hasn't been charged yet, then pay this musician. So your third-party intermediaries go away. Now, there is a value to providing the ability to connect to people you don't know today, but that too is being minimized in our global economy. So that block could be, for instance, a Kickstarter coin. And Kickstarter could do that. They could take the Ethereum platform, iterate on it for their own model, and make that a Kickstarter coin. So that's pretty exciting. Businesses don't have to go away because the market is evolving. They can adjust. That doesn't mean they will. We've seen this before. So let's look at a couple of other examples of a smart contract so that we're clear on it. So commercial real estate is my industry. And Knotel takes very lengthy, complex leases and breaks them down into smaller leases so that companies of a few hundred people can lease without leasing for 30 years, 20 years, even 15 years. The commercial leasing space is very challenging for newer companies. Now, property owners and management companies, their goal traditionally has been to get a Toys R Us or a Sears or a Blockbuster to sign a 30-year lease. You all see where I went, right? Okay, good. You'll notice that I use those companies specifically to point out that these leases are not just problematic for the companies, but also for the property owners and managers. Those leases of 30 years often find themselves in a bankruptcy court in the midst of a Chapter 11. That's not an efficient way to do business for anybody. So that moment where you had 30 years on a lease and you leveraged debt against it as a property owner can come back to haunt you. Blockbuster turned overnight from a commercial real estate perspective. So Knotel has decided to launch the Knotel coin. So they're already disrupting the market by renting these spaces for that term, say a 10-year term. And then they sublease it. They manage the property. So this is a new model in commercial, at least as with the breadth and depth that they're going. So they make this coin, and now that transaction, that if this, then that, eliminates what is happening today, which is all of the information is held by CoStar. That's the only company that has all of the leases on record. And if you need information about a lease or a property and you want to buy it, and say you're driving down Ridge Avenue, and you're like, what's up with that warehouse? Why is it vacant? Let's do something with that. You go to CoStar to find out what's up with that property and why it's vacant. And they're a monopoly. They don't have any incentive to release that information or iterate on their own technology. The Knotel coin allows your buyers and your sellers, or your lessees and your lessors, to go peer-to-peer and eliminate the brokers and agents in the middle. Now, if you're a broker or agent, you're probably looking at this thinking, that's bad. But we'll get to that in a minute. There's an opportunity for those people to become disruptors as well. Another one, has anybody bought a house? Anybody own their home? You remember this? This is the first thing you look at when you buy your home. This is page 2 of a settlement statement. Your HUD-1, it's also called. And I did 10,000 of these in 10 years. So this is a nightmare for everyone involved. And just look at the section right here that says 1,100. It's right at the bottom. But these are title charges, just title charges. Blockchain isn't going to just impact big commercial industries like giant buildings. It's also disrupting the residential space already, which is hugely exciting to me as a former title attorney. This is an opportunity for the numerous, if you look at line 1,100, there are no less than 10 opportunities to charge you as the home buyer or seller. Those are opportunities for me to make a percentage of money based on your transaction as your third-party intermediary. At first I thought, no big deal. This will never happen. The truth is that there are very few states here in the United States. There are Connecticut, Hawaii, and Vermont that have state title. In other words, you go to the state courthouse to find out who owns the property. There are 3,000 title registers in the US. So this one may not be hit first as far as disruption goes. But it's on the list, and there are people working on this now. The founder of TechCrunch just bought a property in Ukraine, and he said he did it with blockchain. So my assumption was that he found somebody who would accept Bitcoin and gave them Bitcoin, transferred Bitcoin. But indeed, what he did was he put his property in a block. So he put the title of his property into a block on the Ethereum blockchain. That's pretty powerful. Now, I did find out the truth, because I'm a title attorney, I gotta know. He also registered it with the state at the title office. He's not dumb. But that's profound. the governments are also doing this is fairly impactful. And then there are companies. This doesn't have to be the wild, wild west, right? We're not all, just wild riding horses and, making new currencies every day. It doesn't have to be like that. This is Harbor, and Harbor is creating a compliance coin. So in that block it's a permissive block, and it determines whether or not you're allowed to do the transaction based on whether or not you're complying with the laws of that space that you're in. And this is global, so it can be iterated on. And you may find that indeed you're not compliant with anti-money laundering code or a tax code. So this determines that indeed you are compliant. Now, that also creates an additional inefficiency for people who want to do things that aren't legal, but maybe we're okay with that. Some of us. So it's the regulator service. So it's a service that is within that block that determines, yes, this is appropriate, or no, it's not. But, and this probably won't surprise you at all, so I just give you 3 blockchain technologies inside of real estate that are already impacting my business. There's also, specifically, a blockchain made for the Internet of Things, and there are actually several, but this is the one that's got the most press right now. It's not IOTA, it's not Canadian. I'll work on that one. It's IOTA, and it's not actually meant to mean IoT, it's meant to mean small, which I thought was interesting to apply to the IoT. It is intended specifically for the machine-to-machine economy. So it's specifically for devices. And it provides a near instant, also secure, platform for that economy, reducing the inefficiencies of the chain, if you will. So you imagine how long that chain gets. It can be lengthy. And this does what's called a tangle. Now, that's a conversation for another day. Just right now, think of the chain. But the tangle is more efficient than the chain. And so they'll attach more devices faster than your traditional blockchain. Let's look at 2 applications that I think are exciting, and Lisa touched on a couple of these, not specifically these ones, but these applications. So the first is pretty straightforward. It's a beacon technology that uses IOTA, yes, specifically as its method of creating blocks. Beacons are Bluetooth 5, so they're just low-power communication nodes that can tell you all sorts of things about where you're at, and also tell where you're at all sorts of things about you, which may be something that you're excited about, may not. And so this is called RUVI, R-U-U-V-I, and it's a tag that's using IOTA to get that information back and forth through blockchain. The most obvious application for that may be that the actual monitoring of foods. You saw the mangoes with Walmart. That's a very common method of tracking information about things that should be kept cold or things that should be kept warm. So imagine an application where you're shipping those mangoes and they get to a temperature that will ruin them, so that shortens their life. Maybe it doesn't ruin them. Maybe their shelf life goes from 5 days to 4 days. And in the blockchain, maybe the shipper who allowed a faulty truck out of their lot gets automatically dinged on his shipment for decreasing the shelf life of that mango. That's a blockchain application. That would happen automatically, not because somebody crossed out $1 amount on the invoice and put in another dollar amount. So that's an example of an IoT device providing information that can then be if then that on the blockchain. There's another one called Energy. So I like this one just because I have a 17-year-old daughter. This is a black box for cars, and I like to think of it as Carfax on steroids. So if you bought a car, almost inevitably now, it comes with a Carfax, right? All of the information about that car. Where does that information come from? Does anybody know? Insurers, people that Carfax pays for information about that car. So that's data that's provided from a central repository insurer. one data point. If that insurer gets it wrong and says this car's been in a car accident, but really it was another car, there's no method for you to fight that easily. You can, but it's not easy. And so in that moment, this black box then provides that data directly from the vehicle into a block. So when you go to buy that car, or as a fleet manager, imagine this black box in all of your vehicles. Maybe a little big brothery, but you can say, hey, listen, you were supposed to be at these 5 places for your deliveries in this amount of time. You've not made your whatever it is quota. But what about the alternative? This doesn't have to be a stick all the time. What if you made all of your deliveries, got a safe driver bonus, and got the truck maintenance record consistently, and you get an increase in pay because of that as a driver or as a fleet manager? So there are a lot of opportunities here for automated, if this, then that, pieces to go in those blocks. And again, transparent, immutable, and also consensus. So you can't put something in the block unless everybody agrees it's appropriate. Per chain, that is. And here's one of my favorite companies right now. This is Local Route. And Local Route takes a shipping container. So this is just off the back of a truck. I'm sure it's cleaned. And they can grow food twice as fast as traditional farming methodologies. Here's something exciting for you. With only 3% of the water. Think about how we irrigate farms today. So using only 3% of the water, they can grow twice the amount of food. And they do it without pesticides. So this is one of my favorites. It's called Local Route, like I said, and that shipping container can be placed anywhere where there's a major need for food. So who lives in an apartment? Anybody? All homeowners? So imagine at the top of your apartment building, there are shipping containers. And using the IoT, beacon technology, any number of technologies really, this shipping container senses when you open the door and walk in. And it senses what you take for your dinner that night. And then it automatically puts into the block information for you. So this is yours. It puts in the nutritive value of that which you just took. It puts in the number of steps that you took. And it puts in a cost, how much the food you took cost. All sensed without any human beings being there but yourself. Maybe with drone technology, not even you. So that's another example of that information being placed without a third party. There's nobody at the checkout stand. This is simply information that's obtained. So now for the great mashup of your industrial IoT and your blockchain. We had 3 examples of smart contracts, specifically in real estate via blockchain. But what is the applicability of those with regards to the IoT? So the first one was no-tell. And no-tell is disrupting monopolistic data ownership and eliminating inefficiencies while bolstering a unique and disruptive business model in an archaic industry. Now, add a device, say smart locks, one of my favorites. When you open that door for the first time to your commercial property, that goes into a block and triggers make a rent payment. They're in. Maybe you go see it all by yourself without anybody to give you a tour. And maybe there's a charge for that. Or maybe you put your information that gives you the credibility to go and do that without somebody with you into that block. So you're credible because it knows you. It has this link to you. And then it says, okay, more automated device. Here's your rental contract. And the broker is not there. So in the second one, we saw homeowners and sellers who skip the long-standing gatekeepers of the title industry, for instance. And that transfer of microunits becomes viable. So say you need $10,000. Say you pretty much own your home, or say you own $10,000 of your home, and you put your house on a block. And then your friend, or your mom, if you've been a bad kid, can say, sure, I'll give you the 10 grand, but you need to give me a piece of your house, a micro piece of your house. Now for $10,000, you can almost not even get a home equity line of credit and have that be a viable transaction because of the costs involved in title. But with blockchain, that becomes viable. What if you can't purchase a home via traditional methods? What if you've had credit issues? What if you've had job issues? And this happens to everyone. And the traditional lenders won't allow that. Well, here's an opportunity for you to actually garner small pieces of properties. Maybe you buy a property a little bit at a time, which is what we do with mortgages, but you do it directly this way. And so think about that moment. It's not going to happen overnight. How many title registries are there in the US? 3,000. Yeah, there's huge. So what if we just put an RFID tag on the documents for now while we transition from our current title situation to the blockchain? That's a tag, no RFID. Pretty straightforward, just to keep track as we move into the blockchain. So that's your IoT. And then the third one is Harbor. So Harbor is creating compliance. I haven't thought of a way that IoT can help them yet, but I'm working on it. Anybody else? Compliance block. So they're saying yes or no, this can or cannot happen. They're a regulator. Again, an inefficiency in what is trying to be a more efficient system of transaction or trade. If you think of it, let me know. Or call them. That's an opportunity. So, the end vision, and we're IoT, so we probably know this inherently, but the end vision of the Internet of Things is not disparate devices. It's not siloed systems that humans have to interact and control. I don't think that's any of our goals when we create something in this space. The end vision of the Internet of Things really is all of these discrete things and systems reacting on their own accord in a personalized way, responsive and adaptive to our needs without us pushing buttons. The IoT isn't about buttons, and blockchain will enable more of that by breaking down these silos of information and basically meshing them together. If you're in IoT, mesh is pretty comfortable for you. So think about Web 1.0 for a minute. A couple of you are old enough to remember this. Web 1.0 was academia, AOL, Netscape, chat rooms. Web 2.0 was really about enterprise coming into the web. Facebook, YouTube, all of the businesses and applications that we use today, and really tremendous new business models. But Web 3.0 is about machine-to-machine interaction. We've really evolved, and blockchain is the enabler of our next step in our technological evolution, if you will. Online machines, enabling a seamless process across those formerly disparate silos, and engaging data analytics, countless data points, and machine learning. So that's what blockchain is enabling. With blockchain and the industrial Internet of Things, data ownership may disappear, but most certainly unused data has the opportunity to go by the wayside. We'll get rid of mass corporate redundancies, that monopolistic ownership, inefficiencies, certainly, inevitably intermediaries, and corruption. There are tremendous security opportunities inside of blockchain that don't exist, especially in developing countries. So the opportunities are even greater not here. And they're going to create microeconomies, microtransactions, certainly new business models in the same way that Web 2.0 did, and extreme transparencies. So it's something we should kind of mentally prepare for. That said, in your own industry, as you look around, look for these issues of inefficiencies. Look for areas where there's redundancy. And those are your opportunities in your own industry. They're there, and you don't have to be disrupted. You can be the disruptor, the person who brings this information to bear in your own industry. You can be the artist, the expert in the room on what's coming. You can be the linchpin. Thank you. Do we have questions? Everybody gets blockchain. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Which industries do you think this is disrupting the fastest and has the sort of broadest reach right now?
So FinTech gets hit hardest right away. There are some, like I said, driving to the bank. Now there is a hesitation by most people, and there's also a digital divide. There are people who can engage cryptocurrencies, and there are people who haven't really engaged the internet fully. And I don't just mean outside of the United States, it's very real here in the United States. But FinTech is getting hit hard already. They're already adjusting. So we're seeing established financial institutions engaging in blockchain to avoid being disrupted to their end. We wish companies like Sears and Toys R Us could adjust so quickly. Those 30-year leases really are hard. So I think in commercial real estate, so in residential, it's small houses. Who's going to drive that? All of us as people are going to go to the title companies and be like, we refuse. Probably not. But if anybody wants to, no, okay. But commercial real estate is tens of millions of dollars in transactions each time. That's getting disrupted already, and will continue to be disrupted pretty dramatically. IoT will leap forward. Technology industries who understand tech and aren't scared are already embracing it and using it in applications that seem profound, but they just eliminate inefficiencies, make smaller companies more competitive because they're able to do that pivot and increase their own value. So tech is moving fast, which they do. Anybody else seeing an industry disrupted heartily by blockchain outside of FinTech and actual tech? Is anybody engaging in some blockchain capacity today? Maybe you have Bitcoin. I know my COO invested, yeah. So not uncommon. Most of my engineers are at least playing with it or working around it. Is everybody hungry? Oh, yep, go.
So there are I think there's privacy concerns around using blockchain in a lot of places because the benefit of having all that data becomes publicly available and also some of the downsides. With Bitcoin, all of your transactions are public, and so you only really have as much privacy as you have the ability to dissociate multiple quality. So is that something that anyone is working in space to find? I think there are areas where, right, where simply not
Yeah, so HIPAA is a great example of a space in which, you think it's great to have all of your medical information in one place where any doctors that you go to can easily access, but who else is going to be able to access that? So much like Harbor created, it's called the regulator service, a service that determines compliance. We'll also have those in the health industry, and they're already working on this today, who are creating a privacy bubble around certain pieces of information in that block. So you're still going to get both hashes, but the data itself is going to be verified by you and your group as opposed to public groups. So it's an add-on. And as I said, that's an inefficiency that blockchain is working to avoid. But in those circumstances, HIPAA compliance, it's hugely important. And we'll see more of those compliancy coins and chains coming into play they're already all in the works. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of iterations on blockchain. I think I see food. Yeah, okay. Thank you guys very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.